Hello everybody, welcome to this. It's the first SandSI webinar. There's going to be 3 webinars scheduled over the coming months. Today we're going to be looking at the ISO 2012-1 International Standard for Event Sustainability and how it's been used by sports events to improve their sustainability performance. The next webinar in a month's time is going to be about carbon offsetting, and the third one is about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal and their application and relevance to sport. If the feedback's positive from these 3 webinars, and SandSI are going to continue to look to provide more webinars moving on into the future. But back to today's subject, it's the ISO 2012-1 Event Sustainability Management System Standard. We'll briefly describe what the standard is and how it works, and we then listen to our 3 case studies from our speakers, who are Neil, Viviane and Caroline. We'll discuss the process of implementing the standard, what benefits it's brought to them, and what problems have been encountered along the way. But of course, this webinar is an opportunity for you to learn some more about the standard and ask your questions. So we want to encourage you to ask questions at any point, and you can see there's a box for you to write your questions into to the right of your screen. You don't have to wait until the end to ask, so just please send in your questions when you think of them, and we'll try and fit them into the discussion as we go. My name is Russell Seymour. I've been the Sustainability Manager at Lord's Cricket Ground in London since 2008. I also founded, and I'm now the Executive Director of BASIS, the British Association for Sustainable Sport. So ISO 2012-1 actually started as a British standard. It was BS 8901, and it was in anticipation of the 2012 London Olympic and Paralympic Games. And a big part of the bid document for these games was the sustainability strategy. And the local organising committee wanted a credible third-party assessment and certification. So they approached the British Standards Institute to develop a sustainability management system for events. My involvement with the BS 8901 started in 2007 when we tested the draft standard at one of our cricket matches here at Lord's. It was the first time that the British Standards Institute tested a standard before publication. And I think the original case study is actually still available if anybody wants to Google it. I then joined the UK Mirror Committee for the conversion of the British Standard to a full international standard, and then saw the publication of that standard for the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Since then, the standard has been used by many organisations and events to help improve their sustainability performance, and I currently represent the UK sports sector as a member of the British Standards SDS3 Committee on Sustainable Production and Consumption. So just a brief introduction to what the standard is and what it does. So ISO 2012-1 is a management system standard, which means that it provides a method or a process for managing the sustainability impacts of your event. It can be used for one-off events, but it may be best used to demonstrate improvements over time with recurring events. The standard itself doesn't tell you the issues that you should address, nor does it actually give you targets to hit. The audit process, while giving recommendations, really is a simple pass-fail. You're either compliant with the standard or you're not. So the organisation itself defines its own scope. It determines which of its impacts are the most important and which to deal with. But of course, to be taken seriously, the scope defined and the actions you take have to be realistic and have to be genuine. So, for example, there'd be no point in focusing on recycling your office paper if your catering operation is wasting large amounts of food or your carbon emissions are out of control. But it's up to you to determine what impacts you'll address and in which parts of your operations. So we're now going to hear from the first of our 3 speakers who will talk about their experience of working with the standard. Our first speaker will be Neil Beecroft. Neil is a founding director of SandSI and was a UEFA Sustainability Manager for Euro 2016, which obtained the ISO 2012-1 certification. He's a co-creator of Bramble Services and the NGO Let's Play Association that provides football kits and education. Neil is also the founder of Pura Worker. So I'm happy to hand over to Neil, but please do remember to send in your questions as and when you think of them. So over to Neil.
Okay. Hello, everybody, wherever you are in the world. May I just ask to become presenter in order to share my screen? And then in the meantime, fantastic. Great stuff. So just whilst I'm up. Fantastic. So thank you, Russell. Hi, everybody. Neil Beecroft, as Russell said, one of the founding directors of Sports and Sustainability International. A couple of years ago, we gathered with a few people involved in sports and sustainability, and to this day, seeking to share knowledge, to open books. The world, as you know better than me, has no time to waste. And I think this is how SandSI wants to evolve, is sharing knowledge, intangible and tangible knowledge, using today ISO 2012-1 as a first case study. So what I've been doing recently after leaving UEFA is co-founding SandSI with a lot of various actors in the field. We're also seeking to enhance collaboration, such as today's one with Basis, where Russell is moderating our webinar, and also with the World Economic Forum, really to share knowledge, not only into event management, but also into venue design and all the industries linked to sustainability. Recently, I've been involved at a late stage to try and boost and enhance sustainability measures within the Winter Olympic bid of Sion 2026. Unfortunately, not managing to convince the population. I think really now is the time for change within sports events, and sustainability going to the top of the agenda, as you have seen with the new Ioc Sustainability Strategy. And I think ISO 2012-1 is one of the key weapons to enhance and boost transversality within sustainability. So as we move to the next slides, so really coming back to Ioc. Ioc pushes through their new sustainability strategy various sectors linked to venues, but also linked to event management. One of them recognizes green building standards. So ISO not being the unique standard, there are many various standards out there, whether it is within catering, hospitality, event management, and really for event, the must currently is ISO. It's an international standard, because as you know, every country has their own, whether it's in the building industry, whether it's in the event, and ISO aims to galvanize and to standardize best practices or practices in the field. So as Russell said, London paved the way. Roland Garros, you will hear with Vivian, got certified, and this was a great way for me to push at UEFA to also level up and step up and become the first football event at this scale to be certified. I was very lucky to have Caroline pushing hard as well by my side, and she is doing an amazing job at the World Economic Forum, and she will always share with us, but with you today, what the WEF is doing as well in terms of ISO 2012-1. So this is, again, not the only standard out there. What we advise is, of course, to aim for ISO 2012-1, but also to align on other best practices. One I follow quite closely is ISO 26000, which is certification in good governance, and also now having a link directly with the SDGs. If you want to perform a life cycle assessment, then there are standards as well out there to comply. And also, if from the very start of your organization, you align yourself on processes where risk management or responsible sourcing is also included, then this is of best practices, and this will also enhance your ISO 2012-1. So when you do start a sustainability strategy, as you know, there is not only ISO, but there's the waste management policy, there's supply chain management. There are a lot of various steps and actions needed to build your strategy. My biggest recommendation why one should go towards ISO is you go from soft power to hard power. we can all be convinced in our own world. The society and the planet is convinced that we need to go towards sustainability. The reality is that everyone has various tasks and delivery within event management. And I do believe that ISO gives this extra boost to put in place all those processes in order to ensure transversality of sustainability. So basically, to summarize ISO 2012-1, it's project management with a layer on top of sustainability, which really spreads the whole green or social or economic aspect of sustainability within the organization and also throughout the various stakeholders. I've also put you a SWOT analysis, which is a bit tailored and can be also taken over by yourself within your own organization. I think when you start, it's better to already analyze your strength, your weaknesses, but also the opportunities or the threats of going towards ISO. There will be one moment where it will be mandatory. There will be one moment where ISO will be mandatory for major suppliers. We are going anyway towards stricter and stricter standards. At the same time, ISO needs to be adapted. And I think really today can be the opportunity to really share the behind the scenes and future developments of ISO 2012-1. What does it include? So a lot of key processes, really keeping in mind 4 ethical values and principles that one can find around inclusivity, integrity, stewardship as well. I'm sorry, and transparency. So if you always keep those 4 ethical management principles, then all of them cascade through your organization through ISO. So first of all, to perform a materiality matrix to identify which sustainability priorities are common or are important to your own event. If I go in certain countries, maybe workforce, also labor rights will be very important. And in other countries, maybe protection of natural resources will be more important. So that's really contextualized to your own organization. Defining your scope. Start small and then expand rather than try to include everybody and notice that due to potentially commercial reasons, some of your parameter cannot be included in your processes. Also, just look at your project management. To whom does it apply to? Is everybody involved? Project planning, honestly, be ready not to sleep much during the ISO 2012-1 certification. And this is really giving that extra boost, not only to yourself, but to your own organization. You need to have top management support. Otherwise, really it's impossible, because think about it, your top management will be performing the management reviews, will be backing you up. And also ISO 2012-1 gives this transversality, and think about the bottom up also strategy. So really this ISO 2012-1 is doing a cross throughout the organization, transversal cross, but also bottom up or top down. Without top management, it would be very difficult. Key performance indicators, analyzing your stakeholders, doing a risk register, analyzing your resources, looking at the legal context. Is there a reason why your event would have a negative impact on the neighborhood in terms of environmental laws, whether they are protected species? This is something that if you do a legal register in advance, you will prevent from having disciplines which need to be moved. This has happened recently in Switzerland, where the event was supposed to happen in a given protected area. If there had been a legal register to look before the environmental protected areas, we would have spared a lot of change management. Supply chain management is key. If you as an organization is sustainable, will your suppliers also be? Because how will you have control on them if the concessions or the people working in the concessions that come the last day before the start of the event have not been briefed in terms of sustainability? It's easy to brief your organization, kind of, but how easy it is to brief the guy working at the concession that has just been employed one day, or the steward working at the front of your stadium that the day before learns that he has to be the next day at 8 o'clock in the stadium. And these people need to be aware for you to find a way to do that. Audit log, you have to perform before an internal like status of your project management, and then having it reviewed by the top with a reporting and a maturity metrics to assess your continual improvement. This is really, for me, one of the key aspects of ISO, where you really analyze your stakeholders. The old school model was the federation or the international federation or the event dictating its operations or procedures. The more we evolve, the more we go towards co-construction. The more we go towards co-construction, the easier it will be to have an influence on sustainability. Why? Is because you include your stakeholders from the very start of the process within the design phase of your sustainability strategy. And also you analyze your risk group in order to prevent that NGOs or media or the general public have criticism over your procedures. Stakeholder engagement, I've just put here an example of how we did it at the Euro 2016 to vulgarize, because maybe what I'm telling you today is very scientific or very technical, but you need to find a way that everybody throughout the organization understands a minimal aspect of sustainability and ISO 2012-1. So really tailoring your message to the person you have in front of you, because the steward at the front of your stadium, who maybe does not speak the same language as yourself, will be audited by the auditor on sustainability, and he has to know what his job or his task has as a link towards sustainability, whether it's on the social aspect or environmental aspect. So as we go towards my conclusion, some of the recommendations I've put there comes back to various items I've shared today. One is to have the full top management and organization backup. Why? Is you need to convince, you need to seduce, you need to push, you need to engage. Yeah, good energy is spent there. Then I would tailor ISO 2012-1 to your size. This is kind of the beauty of ISO, if I may call it that way, is that it's not just for the IOC, it's not just for UEFA, Roland Garros, or the WEF. The Balélec Music Festival in Switzerland has managed to certify, whether you have about 500 risks in your risk management folder or you have 2 risks, the aim is to have a risk register. The aim is to have a legal register, whether you have 500 pages or 1 page, to show that you have looked at the scale, at the parameter, at the scope of your event. And really, this is a key message I want to pass, is it's not just linked to top events, it's project management. And in any given event you will organize, you will have project management. Then assess already the existing project management, the existing sustainability measures, because all of this is something you can build upon. If you do perform an environmental assessment, make sure that they align on ISO standards. Why? Is because at one point we will need as well to align ourselves between various events, and we're not there yet compared to ISO 2012-1, but one day we will need to also be able to have one common procedure to assess the carbon or the ecosystem impact of our events on the environment. Communicate internally, externally, explain to the population, explain to your top management, explain to the politics how important it is. And then also, this is something I've thought about recently, is to include ISO in the legacy. Why is how many promises have major events done once the final whistle or the final ceremony is finished? Then everything goes back to normal, and unfortunately some white elephants may still be there. If ISO 2012-1 includes the legacy in its certification process, I do think that the attention of the media will be able not only just to communicate, but also to put pressure on the politics or organizers to go beyond the final whistle. And then one of my recommendations would be to include this within the tendering process for the major operational partners. We had a case at UEFA Euro 2016 where our major logistic partner went for ISO 2012-1, and that meant that we could communicate better, talking the same language, and then we were sure that what they signed, they would accomplish, because they were being audited upon and not just greenwashing all of their amazing things they were doing. Then also, last recommendation to finish today would be to update ISO 2012-1 to integrate sustainability targets, because you have to understand that ISO does not ask you to recycle up to 80% of your waste management or to produce renewable energy. They ask to put in place a process towards efficiency in a certain way, stewardship being one of the 4 values. So on my side, I would still like this notion of targets to be in place. Why is again, the world and the resources have no time to wait that all the events obtain the ISO certification, but there must be a way to at least put some targets without like an agreement on figures, but finding a way to push the organizers to be ambitious. Then focus more on the operations. A lot of ISO 2012-1 events have been certified before the kickoff of the event. Why is they were assessed on the project management side, and then during the event they were being audited, but that was more to look if what they had promised would be accomplished. I would really recommend to put yourself under the challenge of really certifying your project management plus your operations. Why is because you can promise, you can put on paper, but nothing replaces reality. Then lastly, less redundancy. There are quite a few parts of the standard which are repetitive, and I think we could streamline some of the processes. Finally, make ISO sexy. Hopefully my presentation was. It's not the easiest part, but I look forward to your questions, and I'm very happy to be along you. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Neil. Thank you for that overview. I enjoyed early on you characterizing ISO as project management with an overlay of sustainability. It kind of targeted it very well for me. Next, we're going to hear from Viviane Fraisse, who is Head of Sustainable Development at Roland Garros, where her role includes the management of the ISO 2012-1 certification process. Viviane also has extensive experience in communication, and she's responsible for the communications department of the French Tennis Federation. So over to Viviane.
Yes, hello. Hi, everybody. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I will speak about our certification of our tournament Roland Garros. I give a brief introduction about the French Tennis Federation. We are an old federation created in 1920, and we have 1 million club members and about 4 million players. We organize 2 major events: the Rolex Paris Master in the late October, and the French Open Roland Garros, which belongs to the federation. Our approach has been for a long time. We began in 2008 with the signature of a charter, an environmental charter, with the French Ministry of Environment, and we decided to measure our impacts and to reduce them. It was about an environmental way, especially. And then we developed our sustainable operations about waste sorting, green teams, eco-cups, reducing transport impacts, and we work on that. In 2014, we decided to launch the certification. I will just come back to it later. And until now, so we have been committed for now 10 years in the term of sustainability. So we decided in 2012 and 13 to determine our new sustainable strategy, and the most important objective was to integrate sustainability in our events. So Roland Garros was a major event. The standard ISO 2012-1 was just created in London, and so we studied it, and we thought from the beginning that it would be a plus for Roland Garros and for all the structuration of our sustainable actions. And it was a way for us to implement a long-term strategy, and it would be duplicated on our other events on our regions. So we launched ourselves in a observation phase in 2013 to observe the internal functioning, what process were already implemented, and we just underlined the way that we had a lot of process about security, about waste sorting, about host welcome desk, etc. And we structured our committees, operational committees and steering committees to work on the tournaments. We work on reportings to improve ourselves. We interviewed our stakeholders to know the way we were committed to them and the way they saw the way we were committed. And so we spoke with our partners, our providers, with our neighbors, with our medias and spectators. We launched also the more important legal monitoring, and with all of that, we prepared a procedures manual. And so we launched a diagnostic in March 2014. And we just saw that at about 75%, we were ready to try to launch the certification. So we decided to go. And in May 2014, we launched the certification. The scope was just the tournament. It was not the Stadium Roland Garros. It was the tournament during the preparation, the assembly, and the competition for all operations organized for ourselves. We obtained the certification in May 2014, and we have been renewed it in 2016, so it's the 5th year we have been certified now. It's a way for us to have a continuous improvement of management system, because every year you have non-conformities, you have observations, and you have to work on them to address them and to improve our impacts. So the good implications we saw in the certification were outlining our objectives and targets. The ISO standard asks you to have really precise targets. It helped us, the management review. It's a very important stage for us every year. We present in front of all the steering committees and our management directors. We show them the way our management system does function, and it's a very important moment for us of exchange of discussions about the way we are matched or not in our management system. The certification helped us for a responsible procurement. It's perhaps the most important thing we had for the certification. Now, in all our bids for tenders, we have CSR, sustainable clauses, and we evaluate our providers. It was demanded by the certificator, and perhaps the most important for us. So today we can say that 86% of our procurement has sustainable clauses and evaluations. We made a CSR guide for our providers. So every new provider has a CSR guide before the tournament to give the principal rules and an idea of their impact on the tournament. And we improved too about legal monitoring and the adaptation of our human resources. Another good implication was underlining and promoting existing good practices. We underestimated and think the good practices of our staffs or of our providers, and one of the important things of the certification, it's everything good is underlined, because everything is written in a procedures manual, and it's a way of promoting what is well done. And it gives a more importance of sustainable development, because you have to write a missions and values statement, because you organize management reviews, because you carry internal audits, and everything of that is it's underline the importance of sustainable development in your organizations. And I will finish by the implications externally. Three implications. It has motivated our stakeholders. You have to interview your stakeholders, so you have to listen to their expectations, and you improve on a lot of ways you didn't imagine as ways to improve, but the discussions with our stakeholders were very beneficial for us. Your stakeholders, because you write that you are certified, accept very well their new responsibilities during the tournament, because you say that you are a certified tournament. It has an impact on their level of responsibilities. It attracts responsible partnerships. We had a new partner, a new energy partner, and a new sustainable partner because of our implication in ISO 2012-1. It's an energy provider, ENGIE, and he asked for us to be our sustainable partner because of the certification. And for existing partners, I think you can work on them about new operations, sustainable operations, and today partners are demanding new sustainable operation, and we saw the link between those demands and the way we were certified. And in conclusion, I would say that it has a very good effect on the image of the event. As said, perhaps Neil, I'm not sure we communicate very much about the certification, because we just want to improve each year, every year. And it's not necessary for us to communicate about the certification, but I think we could be more communicating about this certification if we would communicate together, because I think it's a very, very, very good strength for every of us. It's a very an official recognition of our approach, all the events. The last photo is just to see the motivation of our stakeholders. You have the winner of Roland Garros, Muguruza, and our green teams. she was this player who won Roland Garros in 2016 was very happy to participate to a responsible tournament, and she asked us to be part of the organization, and she asked us to speak with green teams, with people involved in sustainable way. And it was very interesting for us to see the way the athletes and the players were interested in the way we tried to be more responsible. That's all for me.
Excellent, thank you very much, Viviane. It's really good to see the athletes actually getting involved as well. Our third case study is a bit different. So many of our venues host non-sports meetings and events. They're actually going to go to a non-sports application of the ISO 2012-1. So we're going to hear from Caroline Duran-Gastelin, who does have a sporting connection herself, having worked on the sustainability program for UEFA 2016, but she now works for the World Economic Forum and will be presenting on using the ISO 2012-1 standard at the World Economic Forum in Davos earlier this year.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Neil, Russell, and the team. Thank you for the opportunity to share a case study that is a bit outside of the world of sports, but indeed, I think the events world is a bit has the same constraints and the same opportunities everywhere. So thank you for the invitation. Just a few words about the World Economic Forum for those who are not familiar with what the organization do. So we are an international organization which engages with leaders from business, political, academic, and civil society background to work on 50+ projects in all fields. So it includes education, circular economy, food, health, mobility, and so on. And so what the forum does is to engage these people throughout the year with major events where these people can gather and discuss. And the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos is the biggest event. And so this is going to be a strong focus on that specific event in this case study, because this is the one for which we have obtained the ISO certification in January this year. So I think the objective here is just to tell a bit the story of how we got to this certification, and also to show you a couple of concrete examples of what we have done. So first of all, why was it decided to go for this certification for our organization? Because we wanted to build on existing sustainability practices to create a system for action. So we had existing best practices in different fields, in energy management, in decoration, in catering, but the idea was really to structure it. And this is also what I heard from Viviane, and I think it can really be useful for a lot of organizations, that when you choose to go for the ISO certification, it really helps to structure all the different things that have been done in the past into an integrated approach to sustainability. And the idea was also, of course, to embed as much as possible the sustainability principles that Neil was talking about into our day-to-day management. And so this is how we came up with the sustainability policy, which is now on the website. And this was 3 years ago. 3 years ago. So I'm sure everyone now is very familiar with ISO 2012-1. It is a management system. So indeed, it forces you to plan, to do, to check, and to act. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of questions that you have to ask yourself. But the reason why we wanted to do it is because it demonstrates a commitment in a globally recognized manner. So we went through all those steps, but decided to focus first on one of our events. So not integrated the full scope of activities of the organization, but the main event, which happens. So Davos is in Switzerland, who don't know. And so Switzerland is obviously a great place to pilot test this. Just a few words on a critical success factor. It was to partner with our main supplier, Publicis Live. It happens most of the time that when you are an event organizer, you have a lot of suppliers, and sometimes you have one main event provider. And so indeed, having a partnership and going together in the direction of having the ISO certification is clearly something that helps in order to achieve results a little bit faster. Just a few words on the timeline. So for us, it's a journey that took 3 years. From the very, very first moment where we had the sustainability assessment, so basically we had an expert coming to the meeting and having a look at a bit all the events fields, like from catering to energy management to transport, communication, etc., and looking with us at what was the gap between what we do and what we should be doing in order to have the ISO certification. And then shortly after, we did our first carbon footprint assessment, which also Viviane was explaining, which, and it's the following slide, allowed us to see where we could really progress. So we saw, for example, that having staff coming by plane was pretty high in terms of CO2, but also operations. This is because of the heating, the fuel that we used for heating temporary spaces. So this was a good roadmap to assess where we should go. And then coming back to the timeline, we had our first internal audit in Davos in January 2017. And on the same year, we built all the documentation that is needed to document what we do, what is our action plan, how do we measure results, how do we collect data, how do we continually improve, how do we handle risk, and so on and so on. As explained by Neil before, there are a lot of steps that need to be integrated. And something that we did that I think is a bit more not that common is a social risk assessment, because we understood that many people think of sustainability only thinking environment, and our objective was also to look at what are the social risks. So by social risk, we mean, for example, in our supply chain, is there any risk of child labor? Is there any risk of people not getting paid enough? Is there any risk of people putting their health at risk? And so this gives us, per domain of the organization, a kind of risk mapping to see where we should really engage with suppliers to look at those risks. And we integrated this into the action plan. And then this year in January, we got the certification following an audit by an external company in Davos. Just now a few words before concluding on what exactly what are we talking about, because I think we're talking a lot about the process of being ISO certified, but what did we integrate into our events? So we had an action plan that had 6 different areas, from promoting sustainability to our stakeholders, to limiting our environmental impacts, something about governance, transparency, something about keeping our staff health and safe. So this means basically safety. Being a responsible and inclusive employee and client, this means responsible sourcing and also being a responsible employer, and engaging positively with communities where we operate. So a couple of examples. This is regarding the communication. So we had in Davos this year, in the middle of all the CEOs and ministers, a communication campaign that was telling them basically how they can contribute while they are at the event on sustainability. So for example, one is saying basically don't take the paper program but download the app. Another one is saying use the waste sorting bins. We also had these very, very visible recycling stations, and also some beverage options that were without having PET bottles. So these were really actions where we wanted to engage with events participants. Then, of course, with the help of our event supplier, Feasibility, we looked at all the decoration materials that we were using and shipped some of the carpet that we were using towards carpet tiles. So this obviously reduces a lot the amount of waste. Also, many efforts were done in terms of storing stuff instead of just using them and throwing them away and then buying them again the following year. Some efforts, and I think most of you would be aware about this, is looking at alternative signage materials to avoid having PVC signage boards, but when it's possible, being able to shift towards cardboard signage boards. This is also a way of replacing PVC backdrops with alternatives that look good. I think this one is in cotton. Limiting our environmental impact. So this was basically having energy control systems to be able to regulate the temperature, and also shifting most of the lamps towards LED lighting. So then brings a lot of energy savings. Also on the right, you can see a pellet heating installation. Unfortunately, it didn't come without some operational challenges, but it was an experiment that lasted for 3 years. And the objective was to heat the huge tent that you see on the back with pellets, so with wood instead of fuel. Also on the left, you can see some charging station for cars, because we, I think it's something that we'll see later, we had hybrid cars in our fleets. What you can see quickly on this side is just waste sorting at the end of the event, trying to have piles of materials that are very separate one from another in order to then organize a donation or a recycling. This was a huge effort that was done in the last couple of years. On the catering thing, so obviously having local products, informing people about what is vegetarian, what is gluten-free, etc., and being away, moving away from PET bottles. So this is the hybrid cars I was talking about earlier, and obviously compensating air travel for people coming from all over the world, and then trying to promote the train for everyone from the airport. We are now working since the last year on a health and safety policy, which involves how to manage risks in the event, especially during the setup and the dismantling. And regarding being a responsible client, this is the whole questionnaire that we've shared with suppliers to assess their sustainability level and to engage with them, together with a sustainable procurement policy, a bit like the code that Viviane was talking about. And then a charter for external staff, what they can do, what we can provide them. And finally, last slide, engaging positively with communities. So ensuring that the local communities, the local people in Davos can also attend some part of the events. Voila, so this is all for the case study, and I hope we can move to discussing a little bit on the challenges and maybe answer a couple of questions. Thank you very much.
Russell, I think you are still on mute.
Benjamin, thank you very much for reminding me to unclick my mute button. I just gave a very nice speech thanking Caroline for her wonderful presentation, and nobody could hear me. So apologies for that. We've overrun very slightly just on our presentations on the 3 case studies. So I'm going to jump straight into some questions from our listeners. So I've got one quick question, which I think everybody can probably give what you should do, and it allows you to define your own scope. So how do you know which part of your business to actually apply it to and what your major impacts are? Who wants to jump in first?
Russell, would you mind repeating just the beginning of the question? It didn't go through.
Okay, the question was, how do you know if you've defined your scope accurately and correctly?
Okay. So I'll start quickly. Basically, I would say one guiding principle is the scope of your project management. Does your whole organization work in a similar way? Does your organization have a project management system in place? I think that's the very first question. So if there is no project management, well, then the first thing is to define, and then through this you will see who will be in the scope. You know, whether you already have various divisions in place, do they work the same way? I think really analyzing the project management helps you then to build on top processes and sustainability. And then really the aim is to expand the scope progressively. So not be too ambitious at the start, And also you will realize that with ISO, you integrate the people within your scope, within the management reviews, and you will be able, even within the process, to adapt your scope because you're aiming towards continuous improvements. So I think this ISO gives you the flexibility to adapt your scope. However, this you should always document and reference. So I hope this answers to your question.
Anybody else for a quick comment on how they develop the scope?
Yeah, if I can just jump in. It's Caroline speaking. So in terms of defining the scope, what we did, not for Davos, but what we're going to do for all of the other events is to do impact feasibility metrics. So basically trying to see where you can have the biggest impact and where it's going to be the most feasible. I guess it's a good start to see, identify the quick wins, identify the major projects, and also identify where you're going to spend a lot of time trying to implement stuff for very low results. So if you have different activities, for example, headquarters, different events of different sizes, looking at such a matrix can help prioritize and probably identify a pilot.
Okay, we're getting some questions coming in quite quickly at the moment. So maybe if we just go through as many as we can, but quite briefly. So can I direct one to Viviane, please? I think this is most relevant to you. So having achieved certification, how do you maintain that certified status over the long term? There's a need for continual improvement. So how do you demonstrate that continual improvement through the recertification process?
Yes, I'm not sure I've heard everything because it was not a good sound, but if you ask me how we maintain the continuous improvement,
yeah,
is this the question? Yeah.
Yes.
It's never ending, you know. In the first 2 years, at the first cycle of the certification, the first 3 years, sorry, we thought we were nearly all done with the certification, and now we have just passed the 5th year of certification, and we saw that we have a lot of improvement to go through again, about waste sorting, about traceability, about responsible procurement. Even if we have done a big and important job with responsible procurement, we have still to improve. And so for us, it's easy to improve because we are every year organizing the tournament. Every year we have a debriefing, a global debriefing, and it's about a management system. So every year we have new bad surprises about our organization, and so every year we use the debriefing to organize a new correction plan, and it helps a lot to have the certification, to ask and to demand to our providers, to our partners, to be more accessible, more to have a better sustainable food, etc. So the improvement is continuous. It's never ending because the society continues to move with us. We had a great impact with our transport. So we are thinking about a better way to reduce our transport impact. So the improvement is continuous.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe we can do a couple of quick responses now. We've been asked, what was the most difficult part of implementing ISO 2012-1? If you could each just give a quick response on that one.
Yeah, quick one. When the auditor, and this is why it comes back to the operations important, the auditor gave us the audit schedule something like 3 days before the kickoff of UEFA Euro 2016. So as you can imagine, contacting all the project leaders whether it was in security, if you remember all the terrorist threats that was in France in 2016, or the venue managers, or all of the people that were going to be audited, sometimes kickoff minus 2 hours or 1 hour. So this was the most challenging. It didn't allow for many hours of sleep, because on the side you still need to deliver one of the biggest events in the world. So I think in terms of reaction, but you cannot ask the auditor to tell you everything in advance, otherwise it wouldn't be valid. But I do still believe that that was the key challenge on our side.
And Viviane, what was most difficult?
I agree partly with Neil. Organizing appointments during the tournament for us was difficult, but now we told the certificators to go anywhere, check and ask everybody, and it's a more natural way to organize our events, and the way it's organized now is okay with us. Perhaps. Yes, it was that point, and perhaps at the beginning it was perhaps elaborating the procedures manual, because you have to gather all procedures and to gather them in a manual. But in fact it helped us a lot. So it was a difficulty at the beginning, but today everybody is very happy to have a general procedures manual to get and to check on when we have to improve about a process or procedure.
Okay, Caroline, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, completely agree with Viviane. I think you have to be realistic with the fact that it's going to ask a lot of time the first year. So someone will have to write a lot of documentation. And also probably a little bit of money to the audit process is not free. It's actually pretty expensive, although you can always negotiate it. So just being realistic about the resource that is asking, and also I guess there's something that is difficult is how to answer the question, but what should we change, because we've always done this way. So people, people are very, they are in a comfort zone, and it's very difficult to ask them on top of their job and the pressure that they have to deliver events to do things differently. So this is a constant challenge that basically you have to be patient about this.
Yeah, that's true generally for sustainability. You just touched on cost, and we've had a question in that actually asks that. What is, very sort of rough figures if you're happy to, but what is the cost for you of implementing ISO 2012-1?
First of all, you need to know that you should always negotiate with your certifying bodies, because it's a tendering process, and I can certify in a certain way that there's a lot of room to lower the costs. Basically, it's compared to the amount of dates and the number of days that you will certify your event. The bigger your event, the bigger the number of days they will come. But yeah, I think I'm not gonna have any issue saying that for Euro 2016 we had more than 20 to 25 days, and it came around 25,000 euros. But there we did a great deal in terms of negotiation. However, also what you need to show to your top management is the amount of money that you save and spare, as you have seen with all the examples that Viviane and Caroline have shared, going towards efficiency through ISO 2012-1, adapting to all functional areas will make you spare a lot of money.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Viviane, Caroline, are you happy to give a rough idea of costs for you?
For me, Karen, it's okay. For us, it's exactly what said Neil. It's about the number of days the certificator. You can't negotiate with wants to give. For us, during to be transparent, for us it was 12,000 euros for 3 years. The actual 3 years, it's 12,000 euros.
Okay, thank you. Caroline, do you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. So I think when we talk about the cost, we should talk about the cost of the auditors, of course. So first it was around 20K. But I think also not to forget the cost of the staff that you're going to have to hire or use, and also the cost of the actual measures implemented. So depending on all of this, and depending on the size of your event, I think it's very difficult to compare, but it's just it's something that is significant, can be significant.
Yeah, definitely. There's one specific question for you, Caroline, that has come in, if you're happy to take it. They asked, does the World Economic Forum inform its elite attendees about sustainability efforts? Is there any particular communication you give them?
Absolutely, yeah, and that was included in the presentation. So we had a huge poster campaign to inform people how they can contribute while making choices in terms of how they go from a point B to point A, like shuttles instead of using taxis, and also sorting waste using the sorting stations and so on. So this is definitely something that we try to create from the operational perspective. So it is true that it's a constraint that the people who come to our events are really used to having a very high level of service. They are used to having their own drivers. They are used to a lot of things, but it's also our role to try to engage them into this. So yes, we try.
Excellent. Very, very good to hear. We haven't been able to get through all of the questions that have been asked, but we are just past 1 o'clock for me, probably 2 o'clock for many of you, but we've just passed our 1 hour. So I think we do need to wrap up now. From my perspective, I've enjoyed moderating this first webinar for SandSI. I hope it's been of interest and of benefit to many of you. Remember that there are going to be at least 2 more webinars coming up. So the one next month is going to be about carbon offsetting, and then the third one a month after that is going to be about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and their application and relevance for sport. So this remains for me to thank our 3 speakers again. Thank you to Neil, Viviane, and Caroline, and thank you all for listening, particularly those of you who sent in your questions, and apologies if I didn't get to your question. But unless there's anything else from the speakers or the organisers, I think we are ready to wrap up. So thank you again, and hopefully you'll be listening in a month's time.
Yes, and if I may, thank you, Russell. If there are some burning questions, please send them to info@sandsci.org. And on my side, I'd be very happy to answer to them and to come back to you guys.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.